Hey guys, Tom here again from synthhacker.com and welcome back to another tutorial for Extra Records Serum. In this tutorial we're going to be looking at making the lead sound from Daft Punk's track, obviously classic sound from their track Daft Funk, but it is kind of a modern twist on that sound as well. It's not quite as analog sounding, but I think it would be definitely very suited to a lot of different genres these days as well, especially like drum and bass and stuff like that. I think it could be really useful. But this is the sound we are going to be looking at making. Really rich sound. There's a lot going on here, a lot of resonance and stuff like that. I'm using pretty basic waveforms really, nothing too complex. Obviously the original sound will have been made using something like a Moog or something like that, you know, an analog synth with just basic waveforms like we use in here, just a square wave, sawtooth wave and a pulse wave. But yeah, let's get into making the sound completely from scratch. As always guys, if you haven't done already, you can find more presets like this for sale on my website over at synthhacker.com. Definitely go ahead and check those out if you haven't done so already. Some really cool preset packs on there, including my Serum mega pack, which actually contains over 600 presets, all handcrafted by me. So definitely go ahead and check that out if you haven't done already. But without further ado, let's begin making this sound completely from scratch. So as I mentioned, it is using really basic waveforms, and we're not going to be modulating the wavetable position or anything like that. They're all just going to be static waveforms, and we're actually going to be using both oscillator A and B, and also the sub oscillator and the noise oscillator just for some white noise. But we're not going to be using the sub oscillator in the traditional sense that we've been using it in a lot of the other tutorials, you know, for some low end. We're actually going to use this because we actually want a combination to get the tone that we want a combination of a square wave, a sawtooth wave, and also a pulse wave as well. And obviously because Serum only really has two main oscillators, we're having to use the sub oscillator for the square wave we're after, which isn't too much of a problem really. Now the main thing to kind of bear in mind is that all of these oscillators are actually pitched at different octaves. So essentially what we have the sawtooth wave, which is -2 octaves down, and then we have our square wave in the sub oscillator, which is 1 octave down, and then we're just going to keep oscillator B at the default octave, but we're going to change this to a pulse waveform. If we go into analog and go into basic shapes until we get to the pulse, there we go. So the pulse is going to provide some really nice crisp high end. We've got a nice solid sawtooth wave for the low end, and then just to fill out the kind of mids of the sound, we've got a nice square wave. You can kind of experiment around with this. You might find that you prefer the saw wave to be in the middle and the square wave at the bottom. It's obviously completely up to you. I definitely recommend kind of experimenting around with all this stuff and seeing what you think sounds best really. The next thing we're going to do is just go into the noise oscillator. We're going to use the ARP white noise, and we're just going to keep this at the level whereabouts it is really. This is just going to add some nice like noise to the sound, obviously, just really kind of fill out the frequency range of the lead, because it really, in the original track, it really dominates the mix. It's pretty much the only thing that you're actually drawn to, so for that to kind of be an effect, it's really helpful to fill out the frequency range of the sound. We're just going to pretty much keep the oscillators as they are. We're not going to add any voices of unison or anything like that. The only thing we're going to play around with a little bit is the levels. I think what I did was have the low end be lower than oscillator B and the sub oscillator as well, because it is a lead, you would probably have another bass element underneath it or something like that. We don't want the low end to kind of dominate the sound too much. And then yeah, we're going to have the pulse wave, we're going to pull that back a little bit but still be a bit louder than oscillator A, and then also just reduce the volume of the sub oscillator as well. And yeah, the really kind of main thing to bear in mind is because we're going to be pushing the filter as much as we can, this analog modeled filter with the drive, which is going to boost the amplitude of the sound, we don't want the levels of these oscillators to be too loud. The next thing we're going to do just before diving into the filter section is set up our amplitude envelope. What I did for this was just bring the sustain down ever so slightly, so the sound dips in amplitude over time just slightly, not too much, and then simply just add like 100 something milliseconds of release or so. And that's pretty much it for the amplitude envelope. And then for envelope 2, which we're going to use for the filter envelope, we're going to bring the sustain right down to around like 0 or 2%, something like that. And then we're just going to give it quite a long decay, something around like I guess like just over 2 seconds or something, and then we're going to make the envelope a little bit more linear as well and a little bit less curved as so. And what we're going to use this for, this envelope to, is just to modulate the cutoff position of the filter, which is really giving us most of the characteristics of the sound. So first of all, make sure that all the oscillators that we've programmed so far are being routed through the filter. And then we just want to set our cutoff as it is here, and I'm just going to bring the master down here to show you what we have now. So you can kind of hear the cutoff moving down there, but we've still not really got the kind of characteristics of the sound that we want. And what we're going to do is really push this drive, which I believe, I'm not 100%, but I'm assuming that it's kind of modeling the drive distortion that would be inherent in like a Moog synth or something like that, like kind of like an overdrive, and then push this fat parameter up as well. And this really, you have to be a bit careful because it does boost the volume, but it really adds some nice grit to the sound. But it's still not quite the sound that we're looking for just yet. So what we're going to do is just really kind of boost this resonance peak here. And if you listen to the original lead, there's like tons and tons of resonance in the sound. So you can kind of hear that because the resonance pushed up, when the envelope's acting on the cutoff and it's sweeping down, you can kind of hear that like frequency sweep, which is really, really cool. The next thing we're going to do, we've still got kind of a long way to go just yet. What we're going to do is go into our effects section, and we're really going to push the distortion. Before we do that, I'll just set up the hyperdimension effect. This is just basically bring the hyper all the way down. We don't want any unison on the sound, but what we're actually going to use is this dimension expander effect to kind of obviously make the sound a little bit bigger. Now what we're also hearing there is the distortion. If I switch that off, you know, it doesn't really have any grit. But we're not actually going to use tube distortion. What we're going to actually use, which I'm assuming will be similar to what they use on the actual original sound, is the hard clip distortion. I find this gives it really a lot of like grittiness, the grittiness that's like inherent in the original lead sound, which I'll just show you here. You can hear already that makes it sound much more kind of similar to the original sound that and to the sound that we heard at the beginning. I think this is really key for the sound because we are using pretty basic waveforms, and honestly the cutoff frequency isn't very high. But because we're then putting this kind of quite low frequency, this sound with a lot of kind of lower frequency or like mid frequency content and not much highs through a distortion, this distortion is then kind of adding those upper harmonics that are like missing, which is really cool. Adds a lot of high end like crispness to the sound. The next thing we're going to do is just add an EQ because we can hear some like unwanted low end. We're just going to add a high pass EQ, bring the Q down a little bit. We don't want that like little resonance bump, and then bump the frequency. I'll change the frequency to, I mean, somewhere around 200 hertz is honestly all right. And then we're also just going to add a little bit of reverb as well. We're going to bring the mix amount right down. This is just to kind of make the sound less dry. Honestly, the original sound itself is quite dry, so you probably wouldn't want to drench it like too much in reverb, but just for the purpose of this tutorial, I think it sounds alright. Another thing that you'll want to do is also to add some release to the envelope that we're using for the filter. I actually forgot to do that, just so the filter doesn't snap closed quite as quickly, really. And then from here you kind of have the basic elements of the sound. You can really just tweak it to how you like. Just bear in mind that tweaking stuff like the distortion even a tiny bit is gonna like quite dramatically change the sound. Something else that I did was also just to boost the high end even more, was just keep it on this high shelf EQ setting and then just increase the gain. I think I actually brought the frequency up a little bit just so that we are getting just the high end, and this boosting gain to the high end is just a really nice way to bring out some of the high end crispness of the sound as well. Something else to make sure that you do is also, which I should have probably done at the beginning of the sound, is also make the sound mono. It is a mono lead, and then what you can do is click always down here and bring the portamento up, which really gives it that like really nice slide from note to note. And that really just polishes off the sound. It means that different notes aren't interfering with each other after they're pressed after another one, if that makes any sense. So the synth's only really processing one note at a time. And then that allows you to have this like portamento slide from note to note as well, which is really cool, and the original sound definitely has a lot of. And yeah, that pretty much covers the sound, so hopefully you got a lot of use out of this tutorial. If you did, please leave a like on the video and subscribe to the channel to stay up to date with new tutorials that I'll be bringing out. If you have any questions about this sound or any suggestions for future tutorials as well, definitely leave those down below. And yeah, that's pretty much everything, guys. If you haven't already, go ahead and check out my website over at synthhacker.com and check out my preset packs for Serum. You get your hands on some really nice presets, and also obviously it's supporting me in the channel as well. So thanks in advance if you decide to purchase any of those preset packs. I really do appreciate it. But without further ado, guys, thanks a lot for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.